Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of JKL Media, where we do reviews of various mass media. And this is the show that is focused on Severance. And I have with me today my fellow co-hosts and guest as well. So, hello to Karen. Hi, Karen. How are you doing?
Hello, not bad.
And our other co-host, Jesse Jackson. Hello, sir.
Hello.
And our guest, returning again, Brian Pianalto. Did I say that right, Brian?
Hello. Yeah. How you doing, everybody?
Good. All right, so here we are, season two, episode eight, Sweet Vitriol. Any episode that's going to follow up what I think is a masterpiece episode of last week is going to be in a tough position. And I think that this episode is a double whammy because it really went off on a tangent that I don't think anybody was expecting, which is par for the course for the show, but still, it was a little. I don't want to say underwhelming, but it's not what I was wanting the show to do next. And I'm not going to bury the lead here. I really thought that this could have been like a one scene that could have been added into another episode to get the point across of about what was important to the Harmony Covell character. But I have to admit, on my second watch, I did enjoy it more than I did the first time. And it's a very short episode too. I think it was only like 36 minutes. We did learn a lot. And because the second time I was taking notes, I picked up on a lot of more things as I was paying more attention to the background and stuff like that as well. That's where I sit with this. So I'm going to go around the horn and I'll start with you, Brian. I just want quick thoughts from everybody on the episode and then we'll get into the details a little bit more. There was a couple of times where the characters kept asking other characters, where did they go? And I thought that was a very interesting line. Nurse Ratched, I don't know what her name was in the show episode. She asked Gemma that, and then Devon asked Mark the same question.
I loved her hair.
Brian, what did you think of this episode?
Like you said, it's hard to follow up a great episode and be the subsequent story that follows it. And that's happened a couple of times this season. It was like
Yeah.
you're not in the office park, you're not in the characters, the way the shots are, the fact that it's outside and just like in this very kind of frigid looking area. The color grading was just so blue. It was almost, it took me out of it a little bit. It was just so blue that, yeah, it almost felt like a different show, except for the character. And
Mhm.
well, and yeah, I agree. It did feel like a B or even a C story of another episode that was basically stretched into a longer episode. But
Yeah.
they could have done the same. But I guess they wanted to have a singular focus, and that's the benefit of shows in the streaming era is that you can vary your episode lengths, you can vary your season lengths, and you can devote a whole episode to a character who is a important but side character. And so at the end, we do find out some stuff, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. I have my thoughts. How about who's next?
All right. Why don't you share your
Yeah,
thoughts?
one could say that this is the least Severance episode.
Yep.
I agree with Lou that when I watched it a second time this morning, I caught a lot of stuff that I didn't catch the first time through. And this, while I have to say, if this was all we saw, the surface level stuff, it would be a huge letdown from last week. But I do think we got a lot of information and a lot of stuff that we're not going to catch until the end of the series, which isn't going to be in two episodes. Like down the line, we're going to still have reverberations. I almost cannot wait to see where this stuff gets slotted in.
Okay.
I watched it a second time too. I watched it Thursday night and went, okay, that was interesting. And I said, okay, I know I'm gonna need to rewatch this. And so last night I rewatched it after reading a couple of reviews. And
I don't do that until after I watch it.
no, this was, I'd seen it the first time.
No, I know.
Yeah, but then it, and I, yeah, I don't know. I don't love it, but I also trust these storytellers enough that if they, I don't know when, this is certainly important information we needed, and I don't know when the best way to have told it.
Hmm.
So maybe it's you're getting a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Last week was the spoonful of sugar This one, they want to go.
That's
Yeah,
apt. It's the
yeah.
medicine this week.
Well, and if you will give me just a little leeway, I did think of now Main Street's whitewashed windows and vacant stores seem like ain't nobody wants to come down here no more. They closing down the textile mill across the railroad tracks. Foreman says the jobs are going, boys, and they aren't coming back. I think
That is Barry Manilow.
exactly. It is that feeling of in that scene in the diner where they go, the market shifted and everything, where you use a town up and then you go away and then you're left with all those people that needed the factory. That is depressing, yet it's so well done.
No, it's okay.
Apologies to
No,
Karen.
By the way, that was Bruce Springsteen. You guys,
Yeah.
it was not Barry Manilow.
Well, if they know Jesse, they know who he's talking.
Yeah, I just wanted to let them know I wasn't an idiot.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. So the episode title, Sweet Vitriol, is definitely one with at least a double meaning, because vitriol can refer either to it's a chemistry term, or it's vitriol is
Hatred.
somebody is a hateful speech. So we've got this dual meaning going here, and as we find out more about the episode, Jesse's medicine reference is all the more apt, because it took a long time for me to figure out exactly what they were sniffing. I couldn't figure out whether it was ether or something else.
Ether is the theme of the show, right?
So it fit in quite well.
That Kiv, one of the original founders, met his wife at a different ether plant.
Yeah. So we've got this opening shot, which to me, and I think Ben Stiller took one for the team here, because I don't know who else could have directed this episode, especially after the previous episode, Chick-I Bordo. But this was a story that really was really designed to bring Cobell back into the story, because really, when she was let go, or when she quit or was fired, there was really no way for her to come back into the story. So to me, this is what the purpose of this episode was. And it gave some backstory about her character as well. I always bring up Stephen King references, but I thought one of the early shots reminded me of The Shining, when the car's driving up to the hotel.
Yep.
So there was that. And we've returned to Salt's Neck, which is a very desolate looking town. And it reminded me of when I visited my wife's family in Newfoundland.
The Newfoundland.
I could tell. But that was a very run-down town, because most of the houses and buildings in Newfoundland, at least the parts I've been to, they're all really colorful, oranges and reds and pinks and blues, very vibrant colored houses. This area is really quite run down. Whether they built it specifically for the episode, I doubt it, because the roads and that looked very Newfoundland-ish, the way they curved and twisted between houses and that. So that was interesting. Normally, I like to go through episodes with character arcs, but really, because there's only one really character in this episode, we're just going to go in a chronological order this time. And we'll go by location. And the first part of the episode is basically setting up the setting of the episode, the town, Salt's Neck. We get a lot of coastal shots. We see Cobell brushing her teeth, and then we get our first instance of somebody sniffing the ether. And we also get Devon's first unanswered call to Harmony Cobell in this part too. We can talk about that, and Karen, I'll go to you first. We can talk about that part of it, and we can also talk about the coffee shop, what goes on there as well. So if you want to take those first two locations of the episode and talk about your thoughts about those two parts of the episode.
Sure. I was looking for the name of the coffee shop. In real life, it's something else, but that is a real town.
Yep.
The name of the coffee shop in the episode was like the Drippy Pot
Something
coffee
like that.
shop or something like that.
Yeah.
It was so funny. But there was someone on the subreddit that is actually like from that town or nearby,
Mm.
and he gave a bit of insight into the location.
Yep. The
Screen
internet.
Rant does really good stuff on Severance, some reviews, and then it picks out things to talk about. And also Mashable. And Mashable I like for a lot of different things, but it does a lot on Severance as well. Those are my main three sources. And I'll do a behind the scenes thing real quick. I watch this twice, usually on Thursday night or Friday morning, and then again on Saturday, and sometimes early Sunday. We record on Sunday in the just before afternoon. So it's like late morning is when I do all my research, so it's fresh in my mind. I watch the show twice and then I look up stuff, and I'm happy to say that I caught a lot of the things that they're mentioning. Anyway, I'm from a small town in California. It's called Salinas. It's like the lettuce capital of the world. We also had a Smucker's plant there. And
Wow.
when the Smucker's plant closed, it closed, I guess, in the late 70s, early 80s. It was open long enough for me to go through on a tour with my class. When it closed, a lot of people left. There was still bustling industry there in Salinas, but there were parts of the town that became the catch-all for like homeless people and marginalized people, and the migrant workers would move into those communities as well. And it was like, oh, don't go into Al, because those are the, and I hate to single out Al Sal, but it was not the best part of town. Sorry. So yeah, just having to drive through that part of town, it really does give you that mind of the creepy, like you can almost hear crows in the background, all that stuff. The cinematography in this also reminded me of Fargo, which is, it makes you put the actual meat of the episode in the performances and not the atmosphere so much, because once you understand the atmosphere, you don't have to really keep looking at it. But in this episode, it was much more driven on dialogue and the characters and that sort of thing. And we learned a lot. And even just in that opening sequence where she is brushing her teeth by the side of the road, which she's been living in her car, we know that. She drove another, I don't know, 400 miles, 300 miles or so since we last saw her. And I'm guessing she probably stopped a couple times. Anyway, so she's brushing her teeth. She's freshening up before she goes to see Hampton. And she sees that bum in the bus. And I thought, that's where we're going in this episode. We're going to the downtrodden, because this series is a metaphor for office work or industry. And to see him fumble around with the ether and the bag and all that stuff, it was sad. And you could see she just doesn't care so much about that. She got out of that town, and that's the last she wanted to see it.
Yep.
And just, we got so much information by the way people looked at each other, the way they talked to each other. You can tell that Hampton is super smart. And because he does deliver that line, oh, the market had a downturn. He's bullshitting. That is, the market did not have a downturn. He's being sarcastic. What he's really saying is, yeah, once Lumen left, we were put out to pasture and no one cares about us anymore. I mean, I loved Hampton. I liked Harmony in this episode, although she is always weird as F. And then we got a few extra characters. Hampton was fantastic. Her aunt, Crazy Town Banana Pants aunt.
Was that ever
And,
established? I thought she
yeah,
was her grandmother.
no, it was her
Something
aunt.
like, yeah. I know I'm
It was
reading
her
the
aunt.
episode summary, but I still was not sure of their relationship.
I
And
thought
I've
she
watched
was
it
her
twice.
sister. I thought she was her sister.
I thought it was her grandmother. Yeah.
Because they were talking about mom, mother, whatever.
Yeah.
But apparently she was her mother's sister. See.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a letdown from last week's episode, but all the people in this episode really brought it. You know what I mean? I really did think so. In any other series, this would be a remarkable episode.
Yeah, I got to reiterate the point that any episode following Chike Bordeaux was going to have a tough
Yeah.
road home. I think because of the quiet nature of this episode, that made it doubly, because I really did enjoy it much more the second time. The first time I was going like, what the hell are we doing? Like this reminded me of those old like 70s TV shows where you watch the character drive from point A to point B. And I'm
Right.
going, this is old school TV. We don't do this anymore. We just show them getting in the car and getting out of the car. We don't actually show them driving all the time. So that was a bit of a change to take as well. Do you have anything else, Karen, before I go on to Brian?
I'll follow you up real quick. That's part of this show too, is she's driving and what it's putting into our mind is how driven she is, because
Right.
we see she's going to all these lengths. So
Yeah.
there are reasons for everything they do, and I think it's very cool.
Okay, Brian, any thoughts on the first two locations, the town and the coffee shop?
Yeah, I thought the coffee shop was like Karen mentioned, as this show does so well, is like imparted so much information with so little in terms of dialogue. Just a lot of they traffic a lot in visual, and I love that. I didn't catch it immediately at the beginning or what it meant, but like when the I guess the shop owner or the whoever was working handed Hampton the an object was wrapped in, I think it was maybe dollar bills, and it obviously was like something illicit or something. But what was that? And later you find out, I guess that's the ether bottle,
Yep.
and that it's that kind of subtlety that I really appreciate. It's they spend a lot of time setting up the entrance to this town and seeing the town. We mentioned it's a short episode, and it felt like 5% of the episode was Cobell driving your Volkswagen.
Yep.
Probably 3% was Hampton driving his truck, and 2% was Cobell brushing her teeth. And a lot of that occurred in the first so many minutes. And
Yeah.
but yeah, a lot of it was set up, and it's a pacing thing too. Like it's not Baz Luhrmann quick cut type of situation happening here. It was
No.
very languid and just
Yep.
seeing things from a very slow and almost that town is falling apart.
Michael Bay action.
Right. Yeah. And we haven't brought up the factory yet, but that's the next location I presume we're
Mhm.
going to get to.
Yep.
I seeing that and just everything we've seen prior, the desolation and everything derelict and things like that, that factory immediately brought to me to switch genres completely is if you've ever played the Portal games, especially
Mm.
Portal 2. Portal 2 has this entire, and it's a masterpiece of a game, not just because the concept of what you do in the game with these portals that you can make. Storytelling in Portal 2 is just off the charts. And there's
Yeah.
this corporation called Aperture Labs. And when you venture into this area that Aperture Labs had been building as like this major contractor for some government or whatever. It was very reminiscent of that to me. And it was like, wow, I
Mhm.
totally get that vibe. And it just made a lot of, I connected with that. The setting and just what they set up there was really good. I liked it.
Cake.
Yeah. Jesse.
Yeah, I was sometimes I'm watching this, there's no dialogue to begin with. Yeah, I think the disdain that she throws that water bottle after she brushes her teeth is also a symbol of this, not to be overly dramatic, but this town is just now refuge. You
Yep.
would not even think about that. And I'm struck again by the beauty of so often this is a small show. We're inside white wall buildings and you don't go outside very much. The few times you do, Mark going to the restaurant or something, and to see
Mhm.
these wide stretches of this beautiful, desolate material is absolutely beautiful. I was glad I was watching it on my TV and not necessarily my computer screen. And yes, I agree with Karen. The idea of when you see her looking at someone that's sniffing, and at the time you don't know if it's glue or what it is, it's some kind of material. You figure out what this is. And the other thing is, I made a note, it's so dark in that cafe. This show is a light show. Everything is very bright and lumen. And then you see that no, he's giving him on the house this ether.
Mhm.
And then goes back to how do you make money? Like, how do you see if there's no jobs? How do you even make money as a drug dealer? But you definitely, this is depressing. It's set. I have a similar experience to Karen. I grew up once my dad retired from the military, we moved back to Louisiana and we settled in Lake Charles, Louisiana, which is a petrochemical city. the plants. There are people, when I went to my high school reunion, there were people that after they graduated high school, they went to work at a plant and they were able to retire because they put their 30 years working in that plant. And there is a high rate of cancer. You see when you walk in the city or you're driving in the city, these factory plants and they're just spewing smoke out. Like, what kind of crap are they putting in the air? And there was a Michael Keaton film that came out where he went and convinced a Japanese company to do and the first time I watched it, I was depressed because I knew that my Lake Charles would act the same way this city would. That I was given this gift. We're going to be able to revitalize the city. And we're like, no, but I want to do it my old way. And so I just had that same feeling of they've just been used and discarded, and it's depressing as hell. So I think this does a great move of setting, and once again, hopefully there's not a limit, but Cabell, it's a town full of losers. I'm pulling out of here to win.
Yeah. Yep. Good thoughts, everyone.
Oh, is the name
Yeah.
of that.
Young Ho.
Yeah, I remember that movie.
The Ron Howard movie, actually.
Yep.
Was it? Oh, okay.
Introduction to Getty Watanabe.
The only other thing I'd mention here is that Cobell obviously knows the owner of the coffee shop. She never really says his name. I think it's the last thing she says before she leaves Hampton. But they obviously have a history. And when she's driving through the town to go to the factory, and even the scenes earlier, we do see occasional buildings with very faded Lumen logos on them as well. And I do think that the coffee shop does a great job of capturing the history of the town because everybody there is old. If there's any young people, I imagine they've left to go elsewhere. And the one woman's on the breathing tube thing, so you know that she's probably been a lifelong ether sniffer as well. So they established quite a bit actually in those locations. And then, Brian, we're moving to the factory again, which is a Lumen Industry building, and we find out a little bit more about her purpose there. And then we get to Sissy's place, and let's just go up until the point where she is going to go upstairs to the room. So she's meeting with her aunt, who I don't think it was ever mentioned as that relationship was ever solidified in
No,
the
not in the
episode.
show. No.
I took her to be the grandmother, and that was played by Jane Alexander, a great actor. So it was really good to see her. So yeah, let's cover the factory and going up to Sissy's house until Harmony decides to go upstairs.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned the factory already. The one thing I did want to tag on to that was up to that point, seeing some of the parts of the town, the people, the guy that was sniffing the ether, and then getting to Sissy's house and seeing like this very odd religious sort of cult-like thing that's going on. And they mentioned early on that Aunt Sissy was a follower of the Nine, and you're like, what is that? Is that a train? Is that a
Amazon's X-ray, where you
yeah.
can
Yep.
So seeing that, just the level of the degradation and like the oddness of this whole area, it really struck me that this is hella dystopian America. It is completely, we mentioned before, at least I think it's been brought up that in the past, in the first episode, one of the questions that is asked is a name, I don't know, some kind of city in America, or just something like that. And they mentioned different branches, the Office kind of way from the Scranton branch or the whatever branch. But this America is just so dystopian and it's so just a weird, very dark parallel universe. I don't know about parallel. It's just a weirdness to it. So I just was struck by that they really have taken what was a sort of somewhat lens of like where we're at. And it's very clearly now something that's an entirely fictionalized different version, or if you want to go down a rabbit hole of this is a simulation type of thing, and it actually is. But anyway, yeah, I think the thing that struck me about Aunt Sissy's place was that we do find out that the Nine does have some sort of almost in a Game of Thrones-ish sort of way, like where they talk about the original gods. I think there was a 7 or whatever. I don't follow the Reddits enough to know like what people have found in terms of what some of this might mean, or if there's some reference that I'm not aware of.
Egan family,
Is it?
isn't it? I
We
think so.
see that makes me wonder too. Now we're really branching out because it's like, okay, now we're getting into like Battlestar Galactica territory with the nine models, whatever. And it's
It,
who are the nine?
I thought of that too, Brian.
When he
Yeah,
first said she lives by the nine, I thought that was some sort of geographical location or
yeah.
something. Okay.
What did you think?
What Brian just said.
Yeah, I think it there's so much that there's so much layer, right? The idea all some we have speculated that Harmony had grew up in some sort of, I don't want to say not a monastery but a lumen control school.
Yeah.
And we got confirmation that is the case. We got the confirmation about this whole she's gifted. And so I thought this was all much better. I understood it a lot better the second viewing, which I will place on me more than the storyteller. I sometimes, if you're going into a show wanting it to be one way, you have to adjust. They're telling a different story this time, and you have to follow along what they're doing. Yeah, so I think that it was very uncomfortable. I knew who the actress was, but I couldn't name her right away. But then the moment when I talked about Jane Seymour, I went, of course. And
Jane Alexander.
yeah, Jane Alexander, thank you. And you
Yep.
go, oh my goodness, they get such good actors for such small parts. And small as in this will be the only time we probably see Aunt Sissy, but it's an incredibly important part. And to be able to have that, Sandra Bernhardt, I don't know if we'll see her again, but the idea was just this perfect for this. I thought of, gosh, Robbie Benson, now Jane Alexander. And just, I think the casting on this is, and I don't know if it's the Ben Stiller pulling in favors, if it's Apple, the idea that they have enough money to throw in this. I don't know, but I think it is. And when you hear people talking about low budgets and the idea you go all the way to Newfoundland to tape this one episode, and it was the cinematographer who directed last episode talked about how I wanted this in the image. Just a very stark looking episode that reinforces the story they're telling, that this is a stark use them and lose them town, and with a big reveal to come.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah. Also, Woes Hollow was also shot in Newfoundland.
Newfoundland.
Yeah.
Oh, so maybe they were able, but I know that Amazon, when they did The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, they flew one of the characters to Paris to be in a scene where he was on the phone. The guy he played Rachel Brosnan's ex-husband in the series, Mrs. Maisel's husband, and they flew that actor to Paris so that they
Wow.
could film, so he would be there close by
Mm.
versus just
Green screen.
Karen.
Okay, so right off, I'm sorry, I interrupted Brian to say the nine is a core set of lumen values that appear to be ingrained in the town's history. These include vision, verve, wit, cheer, humility, benevolence, nimbleness, probity, and wiles.
I
They're
noticed there
nine-
was like a set of playing cards on that
Oh,
shrine she had in her room, so I assume that
yeah.
maybe those are the 9
Yeah,
edicts that
so
you
there are
just read
nine
off.
kind of tempers that were distilled down into the 4 tempers. So anyway, that's interesting that they deal in all these esoteric kind of values. Strange. So that means you have to be all of those things, I guess. Humility as well as nimbleness and vision and verve, and it's
I guess it's the Egan version of the 10 Commandments.
it,
Yeah.
okay, so We're talking about the town and the factory.
Her first meeting with Sissy.
We know that they were child labor there at the factory. There's a lot of things that are implications of that. Number one, they've used child labor up until now because Miss Huang is also a recipient of that same fellowship, or is going to be
Winter
Tide.
Yep. So Miss Wong is basically Miss Cobol version 2.
Another like a
Yeah.
intellectual descendant in
Yep.
some ways. We also know, because of Woe's Hollow, that Kier married a factory employee, so a sweeper. So there's an implication there also that maybe she was a bit of a child bride, because we know he was already an adult when he went to the factory. He was in his 20s, and that's all from Woe's Hollow, by the way.
Right.
And there's lots of speculation about women's roles in this show. We can see they're brought up to be smart, intelligent, forward thinking, and all that. But then once they do something exemplary, that is something that is meant to be given over to the men, and for the men to, in service of Kier.
Is there any speculation that she's the daughter of an Egan?
There's speculation on all that kind
Okay.
of thing.
Okay.
That, you know, that
Because that worker thing from Wolves Hollow.
right. Yeah, and there's lots of speculation on progeny and prodigy and all that sort of thing in the show. So yeah, that's been theorized. There's never a mention of like fathers of these people except for Helly. And Helly's father is the Egan. Just really weird, the hierarchy. And that's not to get on another soapbox, but that's a magnification of the way things are now. No offense to my 3 lovely co-hosts, but it's difficult to be a woman trying to get a lot of places in society. As a woman coming up in the 80s in STEM was quite a bit of a haul for me. Again, I mentioned I was told I had to wear a dress and not pants, and that was the main sticking point of this one male superior I had. And anyway, I am off on a tangent again. But Harmony, we can see where she's come from, and it puts into perspective everything she's done up until this point. She's not a blind follower of Kier. She's a follower of the technology more than anything else. She came up with it. We now know she is the architect behind the severance procedure and all the other things that are
spoilers. No, I'm kidding.
Everything we talk about is spoilers. So yeah, and Sissy is definitely, she's bought in that it doesn't matter what she is surprised by it, but she's okay, it doesn't matter. I got to destroy this because we can't give Kier feet of clay. They have to be, he has to be up on that pedestal. And you see the differences between the two women in that she has finally been shown that there's no loyalty for her in this company. And it doesn't matter what they have, quote unquote, rewarded her with, that position at the Lumen factory in Kier, the town, that was her reward for coming up with this technology. And now that's been taken from her because she dared to do something against them, and they can't have her with any dissent. And what they don't get is by terminating her and by making her an enemy, she now has ammo. There's lots of little things that are gonna reverberate in the show just from this one revelation, where it puts her into a different light. It puts the overall hierarchy of Lumen into a different light. I'm guessing this is how they've done things, is they've brought up these children, and if 1 or 2 of them make it into Wintertide and they come up with some kind of breakthrough, it's all in the service of Kier. because we know they've gone from, it was ether production was their main source of income. That was their main deal. They made ether because they talked about on the factory floor. He came up with an ether scrubber, it was his wife, and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, they had this new technology, and that is now their product, is the Severance technology. And that's why all this stuff was shut down and all that. So I think her revelation and the way she interacted with Sissy and the way she has interacted with Helena, we see so many different things in that now. Whereas she was a one-dimensional character, maybe two. She was all Kier, 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 Lumen, Lumen. And now we see that, yeah, she's Kier and Lumen, but now she sees that they maybe, in not appreciating her, they didn't know what they had. And it's just now Katie barred the door. She is coming at them with this stuff. And that, to me, it is a bullseye for the end of this season. Whereas before I thought it was going to be Gemma. And now I don't know. Which one is it going to be? Because we have 2 more episodes left, and I can only see an arrow going into one of those bullseye targets. Are we leaving Gemma for the overall arc over the whole series? Are we leaving Lumen for the overall arc? But I think the way we're headed is Mark is getting reintegrated, and now Cobell is going to be part of that. And that seems to be the way we're going. It's so hard for me. And again, that's what I love about this show is you leave an episode that you think is nothing, and there's so much stuff that comes from it.
Yeah, basically did the whole series for us.
Yeah,
So
I'm sorry.
I don't know what we're going to talk about anymore for the rest
No,
of the
there's plenty of
episode.
things to talk about still.
But I just want to cover a couple of things before we jump on into the rooms. We do get more of a backstory on the relationship between Hampton and Sissy, or Harmony. And Devon calls for the second time, and Cobell ignores the call again. I love that Sissy called Hampton a puff peddler. I thought that was a pretty good handle. And there's the relationship between Sissy and Harmony is pretty tense, to say the least. We find out from Sissy that Mr. Drummond had called and was wondering if Harmony had showed up there. And at that point in the episode, we would wonder why would he be so interested in her, which we find out later on. And then, of course, there's the tension between these 2 women. Cobell basically blames her, Sissy, for her mother's death. And Sissy says that her mother and her are non-believers. Her mother obviously died from, I would say, ether consumption as well. What else did we see? We found out about the fact that Harmony had the Wintertide Fellowship, just like Miss Wong is on. So that was good to find out. And then we move from that to the rooms. At first, we go to what was Harmony's bedroom, and there's some interesting stuff on the wall there about Sissy that I don't know if everybody caught, but if Jesse, I'll let you comment about that when I'm done with my bit. And then she moves from that room, she comes back down and goes into Sissy's room. And there's where we see the shrine and I believe the 9 playing cards, which are the 9 virtues that we were talking about. And from there, she goes into her mother's room after she finds the key.
Yeah, a little bit funny that you sold all my stuff. It's college kid coming back home and the parents have taken his bedroom and made it into a workout room. Or, hey, it was there was so much tension between these 2 and so much anger.
Yep.
And I did not write it down, maybe one of you did, but the idea, no, that door should remain locked until all of us are with Cave again. It's no, not till we've all moved on to the next plane should that door be opened, which was a little weird. I have a little bit of personal connection to feel a little bit for Sissy because, as I've shared on this podcast before, over 2 years ago, my mom had a stroke and spent 2 years in a nursing home with absolutely doing nothing. She could not. Her left arm and left leg were totally frozen. For the longest time, they wouldn't feed her. Everything was through a feeding tube. She couldn't even have a drink of Dr. Pepper or eat anything. And it was just sitting there waiting to die. And my sister and I both said, we now understand unassisted suicide, right? Not to get dark, but the idea that she was never going to get any better. And so there was a mercy. So when Sissy talks about there was a mercy to taking her out of her pain, I don't know the whole circumstances, but I can understand that. And to make it a little bit funnier, or at least funny, we used to joke also that the Saturday Night Live skit about pulling the plug and no, I'm okay. No, I don't want you. You said you don't want to be paid. No, I'm good. I'm good. So I just thought that very complex. And there is this anger between Sissy and Harmony. And also this Sissy also admires her. You were the smartest, you were the brightest, you were the best of us. So I just love that dynamics, two amazing actresses, and in that house you go through this Stark room, and then her aunt's room, and then her mom's room, and then sitting there with the breathing tube and laying there. I'd love to hear what you guys think that is. Part of me was like, she's trying to feel one last thing close to her mom, or however. It was just a very surreal and better on the second viewing scenes. The first scenes, I was, okay, can we get something going on? I don't understand what's going on. Let's enjoy the process.
Brian, how about you?
Yeah, that tube scene, I don't know, like David Lynch, rest in peace, esque to me. That was maybe it was a Blue Velvet, that movie that had the Dennis Hopper, or is it Dennis Hopper? I don't remember who the actor was, but yeah, the dynamic with Sissy and Cobell and even the town was interesting to me. The town people were like, she follows the nine, so she's not popular. So that tells me that most of the town could just be like whatever with the nine or the Egans or Lumen or whoever. Man, Sissy, she's fully devout to that whole following. I guess the thing that I'm confused by is, and maybe if I went and did a whole rewatch, I'd be able to and just cherry pick Cobell's scenes, but I always felt like she was very much followed the Lumen and Egan philosophy, whatever you want to call it. And it seems like Aunt Sissy really doesn't think she, even for whatever that is recent history with Cobell being cast out, there seemed to be some animosity there between Sissy and even her Cobell's mother, who was not a follower. And yeah, so I'm still trying to rectify all of that. And so there's just been scenes in the show, not this particular episode, this season, last season, where Cobell was seen as in front of almost a shrine. Maybe that was to her mother. I don't know. And maybe her wailing and some of that singing that she was doing was, now that I think about it, that might have been for her mother, not necessarily for Egan. That would track. I think that would make sense if I was to look at it now. I think it was interesting too that Sissy changed her story at least once with like how the mother died,
Right.
Whether it was one person to pull out the tube, the other person pull out the tube, and the reasons why that she would change her story. That's always very interesting character study for me, to why characters say and do things the way they do.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of stuff to base on at the moment with her, and I don't know if we will, because again, we might never see her again. But part of that was just there's a little bit in that house scene that was confusing to me. And for as short as the episode was, I wish that they'd carved out one more minute in this area, because there was that kind of just spatial geography of, there was these rooms that she was going to, and I got confused for a moment. All right, which room is she in right now? Is it the room that she wanted to get a key to?
Did you watch it a second time?
I didn't. Yeah.
I think that would have cleared up for you the second
Yeah.
time.
It
Yeah,
totally would have.
I had no issues with that.
Yeah. And usually I do watch shows of multiple times. However, in for Severance, I decided for our purposes for this, because the show, I usually watch it on a Friday night, and this is we're recording on a Sunday morning. And so I don't necessarily have the time to watch it one more time. And I decided I'm going to watch it once and take it as the perspective of the
Yeah, that's good.
user
That's good.
X
Yeah,
out there in viewer land who only does watch it one time, and take it from that perspective. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's
And
good.
I think that's a really good thought. That's a good perspective. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Please continue, Brian.
That kind of covers it for me. I love the tension between the two. And again, they're pulling out all the stops, getting amazing actors to come in and do these bit roles. It got too much for me. But they had lots of people come in and be like amazing.
Yeah.
And this show is along that as well. It's
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 I think people understand that this is something special, and they're more than happy to be part of it.
So I remembered what I wanted to say, and to jump in before Karen gets her share. One of the things, right, is no one is more cynical than an ex-believer, right? Whether you're like an anti-smoker or someone who's become sober or a devout atheist after being disillusioned by religion. And so I think that's partly where Harmony is, and the way she was treated was like, hey, wait a minute. So just that you guys' thoughts made me think of that. Go for it, Karen.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a perfect way to put her attitude right now. So you were talking about the walls of her room, Lou.
Yep.
There's lots of stuff in that room. I'm looking at a picture of it right now. There's a picture of some kind of Greek kind of parade. Her merit badges are hung up on a hanger, and then there's her sash with all her badges previously on it. She has little busts of the four humors, magazine articles. There's a picture of Keir there, but there doesn't seem to be like any familiar pictures, like not her mom or her dad or her Aunt Sissy even. She's got candles right under Keir's picture. That makes me think it's a shrine. There's some weirdness there in that room. Old flowers, like dead flowers. And here's the part that I like about the screenshot I'm looking at is we're seeing her look at one wall, but there's a mirror on that wall that shows exactly what's on the other wall, which is a dollhouse.
Okay.
And her dollhouse is full of little standing pictures, and it's hard to tell what they are. Like I enlarged it, but it gets all pixelated at that point. There's no enhance for this, but it does look like it's not a normal dollhouse. There's some dollhouse furniture, but it's mostly just little trinkets. And I'd like to think she's a pack rat. It looks like she has collected a lot of things and she displays them in this room. And I feel like she had to leave all that behind to go on her Wintertide fellowship. And then when her mother died and the factory was shut down and all that, I'm guessing she just didn't come back. And so she's looking around this room, and the feeling I got from her was a very deep sense of melancholy. And I'm guessing they're putting her in the mind of, I missed the part of my life that I never got, which is childhood. She never got a childhood. She was put to work in that factory along with Hampton. And so she never got that. And that's the same way with Miss Swan as well. We can tell they grow up real fast in the Lumen machine. And so I got that feeling that she's looking around at all these little trinkets and thinking, man, where's that girl that was collecting all this stuff? And also, this is her starting to mourn her mother, because I don't think she came back after her mother died. And I think this is her realizing, yeah, this town is terrible and I'm glad I left it behind, but there are parts of me that I left here that I never came back and claimed. And that's on two different levels. She never came back and claimed her things, and she's never come back to claim this part of her. And it's a really big allegory, I think. I
Mhm.
might be reading more into it, but I really do think that she is mourning her youth and her reconnecting with Hampton and kissing Hampton on the bed there, taking a hit. That it really did make me think, yeah, she longs for the part of her that she never had. And that makes me very sad. And again, we know she's part of the antagonistic part of the show. She's not a protagonist by any means, but this does really make her a more sympathetic character to me.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think if that's really one of the only things we get from this episode, I think they've done their job. They have made us understand why she's going to go against Lumen.
Exactly.
So tell me what else you saw in that room.
The thing I noticed was in her room is that there was a plaque, but it was for her aunt, not for her, which I found interesting.
Mm.
And I'm just looking up, like, because her proper name is, first name is Celestine, which I just looked up, and it's Latin for, means heavenly or celestial due to its beautiful sky blue color, which is interesting in light of Brian's comment about the show being so blue.
So blue.
So I found that interesting. But the other thing that I just realized that her nickname is Sissy, which you can take as a term of endearment, or you can also take it that she's a chicken. And she's totally succumbed to the Lumen cult or the Egan cult or whatever you want to call it. Whereas her sister, or Harmony's mother, and Harmony did not totally buy into the cult. Why her mother didn't, I'm not sure. Maybe it's because with Karen referenced to the fact that one of the Egans had a child through a factory worker. Could she be the one that had the child? That might have disillusioned her.
Or a
And
different that Egan was a long time ago.
oh,
But it could
okay.
be another Egan.
Could be, which would be interesting if we found out that she's really that Harmony is an Egan as well. And then there's the thing of that we'll get into a little bit more later in the next segment is about what reason why beyond what happened to her mother. And I think Jesse you brought up the breathing tube thing. That was maybe the last memory, true memory she had of her mother was hooked up to that breathing tube. So she was trying to reconnect with her mother. I think that's a very valid view of that scene. And that she, the reason for why she's not, she, like Sissy says, I thought you were a flower, but you're a weed. The only other thing I want to mention here is that at the beginning of the episode and in the scene when she falls asleep, they go back to the shot of the water crashing into the rocks. And to me, that I think that's the Cold Harbor reference. But I'm just basing it on the vibe that I'm getting, because when a show repeats a shot, then there's usually some significance to it. And I think that maybe this is the representation of Cold Harbor, or where the meaning or where the name for Cold Harbor is coming from. Karen, we'll come back to you. We're going to talk now about Hampton comes up to the room with her, and as you mentioned, they take a hit of the ether. He takes a big one. She takes a little one. And from there, he says to her, I don't think what you're looking for is here. And that sparks something in her, and they go outside to the storage shed.
Yeah, I really liked Hampton a lot. I think he might have been my favorite character in this episode. He's not sure how he feels about Harmony coming back, for one. When he sees her in the coffee shop, bar, whatever it is, I think it might be a little bit of both. He is at first really surprised to see her. Then he kind of rebuffs her, where she says, Can I talk to you? This place is only for paying customers. And I love her comeback was buy me a coffee then, which would make him the customer, not her. Then he runs out of there when she leaves after saying, I need a favor. So there is definitely some kind of bond they have, even though they haven't seen each other in a long time. We know he has stayed behind in the town and she has left. And that really does show how much they bonded over their place in that factory. That the way she talks is very Lumen speak, as we've discussed before on the podcast. And he is just a normal guy. He's definitely the rough and ready to her, more polished. Even though right now she's been living out of her car, but she still retains that haughtiness that he just doesn't have. I really enjoyed their scenes together and the fact that he really gave himself over for her in this episode. We don't know what happened to him at the end, but he is definitely putting himself in the path of danger. And just to help her do whatever it is, and she never really explains everything to him. She doesn't show him the schematics or anything. She just says, I have to find this, and then get your truck ready. And she takes his truck and she's off again. And I am not sure why there is that much loyalty, but I would like to think that maybe they had some kind of epic love story until she went away, that kind of high school first love kind of thing. And a lot of times when that ends on an okay note, like maybe not a hateful note, you do have a lot of fondness for that person. And I think when he was seeing that she wasn't there to worship at the feet of Kier or any of that, she was there for a purpose, he decided, yeah, I can get on board with that. And again, putting himself on the line there at the end, it really showed us the loyalty he has to her. And I loved that. We're seeing this kind of, she was an amazing person before Lumen got their hands on her, because there's no way that guy would have been so into this version of Harmony. I loved their interactions. I thought it was, again, they're always so cryptic when they talk to each other in this show. It doesn't matter who, what pair, but there's a lot of crypticness in their conversations. And I felt like they understood each other, but to us, it looked like they were speaking around each other. But I do think that they have the same base language. And that's, again, that's an ongoing theme here, is the language that people use and where they are in society. If you're in at Lumen, you have this like double and triple speak that you do. And that is, she can't work that out of her system. She is that. But we're seeing that the fact that she still could connect with Hampton was a very, I think, a sobering realization for her that, hey, I'm getting further and further away from Lumen, and not just mileage wise. I'm becoming a different person. And that's, again, it's something for us to see as well, that she can connect with this guy. Whereas a year ago, she might not have really vibed with this guy again. And I think it's cool. I loved Hampton. The fact that he stayed in town to become this kind of drug dealer. And again, they're drawing parallels to real life with the oxy sort of addiction that we have in this country and the kind of town that it flourishes in. We see a lot of people making mess up in the hills and all that stuff. And I feel like that's the same vibe as this town. All of the scenes that were between the two of them, I thought on the base side were, it looked like she might be using him, but if you go a little deeper, I think he wanted to do whatever he could to help her, as long as it was working against what ruined his town. So that's the feeling I got, at least.
Okay.
He reminds me a little bit of the guy from 12 Monkeys, that actor. I'm drawing a blank on his name. But yeah, very interesting, the intimacy of him being in that room. And do you want to get high? And you can see it's almost like a high school, right?
Yeah.
We're up here. Shh, don't let my parents hear. There is that, I agree with everything that Karen said about there's this past and this history that is unspoken, but it's there. Were you just being stubborn? But yeah, I think the idea, and then them sharing that intimacy, and then her eureka moment,
Yeah.
she wouldn't have thrown this away. And their scenes together is just, and that is partly what I missed the first viewing. So on the second viewing is, oh, okay, now we know what she was looking for. And then we'll get to it a little bit when she goes to her aunt and talk about that. But yeah, I love those scenes together. they there's some kind of history and past there. I think he was happy to see her again, and she was, in her own way, happy to see him again. I agree
Hmm.
with that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think the one thing I would say about that hasn't been covered by you guys is that I had mentioned at the very beginning this was the most unseverance episode ever. I think that scene with Hampton and Cobell together in the room and getting high and their kiss, and that was actually Severance because it reminded me of the prior episode with Mark S and Helly are their very shy kind of connection again, teenagers, almost like Jesse said it was very like almost like you're in this home alone in this room, and it's
Hmm.
that was seemed reminiscent of that, and intentional or not, I think that's probably one of the high points for me.
Yeah, I thought, as you mentioned earlier, Brian, that the show doesn't hit you over the head with things. They do it very subtly. I saw that their kiss just told everything about their previous relationship, that they were more than just co-workers or schoolmates, that they actually had feelings for each other. And I like that Cobell admonished his saying, "It's so shameful that you sell it." I thought was a nice little touch as well. And he sparks the idea for her that what she's looking for is not in the house. And then she
Mhm.
goes to that underground storage shed. She finds the notebook. We also discover that through the high school book that she pulls out that she was the valedictorian for her class as well. Again, they're just building up this premise or verifying that
Building the case, yeah.
she's an outstanding individual, that she was top of her class. She was the best factory worker. She was totally into the whole cult of Lumen as well. So that it's only when we discover that what's inside the notebook that we get begin to see why her faith was broken. But still, again, as you mentioned, Brian, she still was faithful to the cult because she had her own little shrine, much similar to the one that her aunt had in her bedroom as well. She's become a very complex character. She was more in the first season, she was the one-dimensional big bad villain. But in this episode, they've really done a very masterful but very understated job of making her a much more complicated character. And then, of course, we'll come back to you, Brian. We have the big scene where she goes back into the house with the notebook, and then we find out that she created the Severance technology, all of it. It's not something that the Egans did. And as soon as they did that, I knew this is how she's going to become relevant to the story again. This is how she's going to get back into the story. I'm just wondering how you felt about that reveal. Does it seem a bit too much for one person to create all that technology? I don't
Yes.
know. Yes. Okay.
This is I that came on the screen, and I appreciated that there was these concepts that she was flipping through, and but I just come out. I didn't like it.
Okay.
I don't know that they've laid the groundwork for that enough.
Okay.
I could see if this was like in season 4 and they had some other character who was in the background and they had laid and track for that to come around. You could say, oh, she has knowledge of dealing with the chips. Any high level manager in that position on the severance floor should you take the courses, you take the whatever to know what the hell is going on and you know what's happening. It just struck me as too like
Convenient.
Phantom Fantasy, like how everything, one person is connected to everything and all the things are connected together to go back to another franchise entirely with my issues with the prequels in general, the Star Wars prequels. I'm fine with it because it does propel her into the story of having a kind of a revenge motive or something like that, or something that I never
Yeah.
got my due. And there's a few minor things that have come up that didn't strike me as true for other characters, but they were so minuscule. This
Mhm.
one is a big one, and I didn't, I just didn't buy it.
Okay. Fair enough.
That's just where I am.
How about you, Jesse? Were you in a buying mood?
Because I missed it the first time, it missed a little bit, but the in my mind canon, said she came up with the concept and a general outline, and then they took it and actually executed all the different steps. In other words, she outlined of what we're trying to do, maybe. And so I think part of her is oversimplifying how much she did. She was part of it, But once again, and then I'll do the trifecta. One big once and I hit the coast. Yeah, but I paid the cost. Inside, I felt like I was carrying broken spirits of all the other ones who you go on living. It steals something from down in your soul. And when the truth is spoken, it doesn't make no difference. Something in your heart grows cold. And that was a song, The Promise, that Bruce wrote while he was in the middle of a lawsuit with his first manager. And so you guys talk about that promise is broken, right? She gave this technology her ideas, her thoughts, the initial, and obviously she knew who we get jumping ahead a little bit. When she hears from Mark, sister, she knows immediately who's working on him. And so they must have worked together somehow. That I'm feeling like she was part of the building this severance technology.
Yep.
So once again, I feel like I'm okay and I'm harmony. I'm okay when I'm part of the team that hey, we're all doing this together. We're all contributing.
Yep.
But now that you've kicked me out, wait a minute. And when they go back to that scene, you fear me. We fear no one. And they go, you've overstepped what you've done. And in her mind, no, everything on this is because of my ideas. So I thought that was a really great wrinkle to see in this journey. Tells her why she feels she's a little more important than perhaps the Lumen people do. So I think it was a nice twist. Totally agree with you, Brian. It seems a little unrealistic that one person could do it. My connect the dots is she came up with the general idea, and then the other scientists and engineers involved at Lumen executed.
Fair enough. Aaron.
I am okay with her having come up with all of it. And it's not just because she's a chick and I'm a chick. Those pages were really detailed. It had notes about the overtime contingency, about the Glasgow block, it had notes about every facet. And there are people, and they're few and far between, but there are people that have been at such a high level of knowledge and consciousness that they do come up with huge amounts of data.
Russell Crowe.
Again, yeah, Russell Crowe is in it. A Beautiful Mind.
Ron Howard movie.
Exactly. I love Ron Howard.
We're on a Ron Howard podcast.
And by the way, in Gung Ho, the guy who Turo was in that as well. But anyway, there have been people through the years, and again, like I say, few and far between, that have had this ability to info dump a wide variety of knowledge. And I feel like once she understood the basic technology of severing, she branched and was able to draw those conclusions, make those lines meet. And wow, those notes, if you look at a picture, like a screenshot of those notes or there's more than one. She's drawing skulls and where to put the actual chip in the brain. There's notes on everything in there. And I'm not going to go down a big road with this, but this is very dystopian. And in dystopian fiction, a lot of the time they do a thing where one person makes up for 10 people because we've lost those people. So what she is a distilled version of 10 or 12 people. They have ways to raise intellects. Lumen does, at least, to pick out people with a high intellect and gear them in a certain way that will give them the background knowledge in order to make these leaps in technology. And I feel like that's what they're doing in this case. We know it's dystopian because there's no one on the road ever. Besides the people in the parking lot, all the streets are clear. We see her on the highway and we see 2 cars the whole other time we see her. And I am thinking they're giving us this information like this is a future America where they have to go find old cars and old technology because that's all that's working still. They've driven all the newer cars and they have to go back to this other technology. And I think they're also telling us that in this way, someone who's special is really special. And they do this with Miss Wong, and I'm sure that Milchek had that, although they seem to favorite girls. That was a school for girls that she went to, by the way. So yeah, I am put in the mindset of she is not distilled, concentrated. She's a concentrated form of an intellectual. And I think that's what they're trying to give us, at least. But in this world, I think it makes sense to have that kind of very concentrated intellect.
Okay. I can see both sides of the argument. I'm leaning more towards Brian's take on it than yours, Karen. I guess the big problem or issue for me is why did she come up with this technology? That's the question that hasn't been answered yet. And maybe finding out that would make it more palatable that she was able to create all this pretty sophisticated technology on her own. Where did she go after she went to high school? Was there a Lumen College or something? We don't know that yet. And so we're going to have to see how that plays out right now. We did a series review of another science fiction series, 12 Monkeys, which was based on the movie book to a certain degree, but it was much more of a time travel, timey-wimey show. Because they were exploring alternate realities or timelines because of things that happened, the show had to really create the context for you to see a character act in one manner and then in another episode act totally opposite to that. And I think we were all in agreement that they did a really good job of that. We never felt anything was really too contrived. I can't place this reveal at that level yet without seeing what the fallout is from this, but it'll be interesting to track this revelation about Cobell going forward. At the very least, though, she's become a much more complicated character, and now she obviously has a route back into the show mainline, and I think that she's going to take over Mark's reintegration from Ragabi. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And the episode closes out with Sissy showing that she's a total convert in that she wanted to destroy the notebook. She wanted to throw the notebook into the fire. And she's telling that Harmony that she should have total fealty to the Egans who saw Kier in her. But she says, I don't have that fealty because they destroyed our town. The counter argument that the town wouldn't exist without Lumen is not a very strong one for me. And you come away from this episode with the deepening understanding of just how insidious and how deep the tentacles of Lumen go into the external world. And I think that they've continued to make that corporation much darker. And I think it's telling that on the third call from Devon that Harmony finally answers. So we've got that three. Three is a very important number. I think, or maybe I'm making too much out of it. I don't know. But on the third day, he arose again. If you want to go there.
I think that's fair.
And she instantly knows, as Karen, I think it was Karen mentioned, that there was Ragabi who was trying to reintegrate Marks or Jesse maybe. I think even though managing this Severance floor is an important job, she's obviously much more capable from a technical perspective, and those talents weren't being used. But she wants to know from Mark everything that Ragabi has done to him so far. So it'll be interesting to see where things pick up next week. The episode is called The After Hours. As I said, I found this episode much more impactful on the second viewing. On the other hand, I think this episode really buried the lead about Harmony, Cobell's importance to the story. So it's definitely not my favorite episode, but I did enjoy it a lot more the second time. I'll just go around the table one more time for everybody's final thoughts. And Brian, since you're in the hardline category, how are you feeling about the series now and going forward? What do you expect?
This wasn't my favorite episode, and not necessarily because of the pacing or how it was different. I think all those things would still make this, for me, it was done really well. I liked the cinematography. I liked the difference of the pacing, the focus on the different characters, the new characters they brought in. For me, the issue comes back to this Cobell being like the
Albert Einstein.
Anakin Skywalker of everything.
She's the one.
He's the one who is
There can
created
only
art,
be one.
you know.
There-
Okay, now you're combining Star Wars and
Yep.
Too many, yeah.
Yeah.
So what's that, something you just said, Lou, was caught my part of my thinking was, why did she create this? And I can see
Yeah, for her mother?
I was thinking, because she worked in this factory where there's child labor,
Yep.
and the whole idea of Severance, and the creator of Severance said he created the idea, and the guy who wrote the TV show, not in lore type thing. He was working at a door factory or whatever, and he just was like, this is so monotonous. I wish I could do something else.
Right.
So maybe the idea came from, she's working in this factory, there's deplorable conditions, there's child labor, and so I can see that being as like a seed of like, yeah, again,
point.
you get back
Yeah,
to
good point.
where did this other idea of all this brilliance of like all the way down to the overtime contingency, like that was the stretch for me, where it's like, really everything is mapped out, everything all the way down
Yeah.
to that. You get to what I would have done, that phrase
Yeah.
starts to
Yeah.
happen. And this
Yeah.
is the first time I've got to listen, what I would have done is I can see her being important, maybe having that first idea, and if she's like the person that knows everything, it's almost like a cheat code to like figuring everything else out. I wish that it would have been that she knew the person, she and someone else came up with the idea of how to do, maybe she had the idea and someone had the know-how, or vice versa or something. And the notebook is like a guide, but it doesn't give you everything. And it's almost like if you really want to go back to the 1980s, like The Greatest American Hero, that TV show,
Right.
the guy
Believe
who
it or not. I'm sorry.
so for people who weren't born in that era, a guy finds a magical suit from aliens or whatever, and he has superpowers, but the instruction
loses.
manual is written in the alien language,
He loses it.
or he loses it, and then the instruction manual is completely obscure to him,
Yeah.
and he has to like fumble around and figure it out.
Yeah.
That gives you reasons why you have obstacles in the way that won't enable you to just get from point A to point B immediately. I enjoyed the episode. The part that I'm wondering about going forward is her being this linchpin of it. But I do feel like because the other character, she's not the main character. She's like as much as they want us to believe now that she is the chosen one, so to speak, it's the other characters driving the show.
Yeah. Because I think Mark is the one. But, yeah.
He's
Yeah,
the one.
I think so.
Now we're
too.
really mixing franchises together.
Yeah. Right.
Matrix, yeah.
Karen.
Yeah, thanks for the William Cat drop in.
Just for
I
the
love
theme
that
song.
show. He was one of my big crushes growing up.
Yeah.
Him and Bruce Boxleitner. So if you couldn't get two completely different people. Okay, yeah, I understand. And who's to say that Notebook was all her? She could have had a little team working on it. Who knows? Again, it's immaterial. She knows all the stuff that's in that little book. She could definitely work with Rogabi on it. And I feel like Rogabi could have been that person, but she doesn't have all the information. So anyway, I actually really enjoyed this episode. Again, it's really let down from last week's.
Yeah. If it doesn't get nominated for some awards and even win,
Yeah,
it would be a crime.
because the acting was incredible. But I think this episode, if it wasn't after last week's episode, could have been not quite a powerhouse, but up there. We got a lot of information, and there was a lot of feeling around this episode, I think. And yes, she's not a main character. She's not. I think she could be a linchpin, maybe a pivot point. And I feel like they made her out to be the main antagonist in the first season, but now we have this much bigger antagonist. And so she's going to be, I think, that kind of person that straddles both worlds, that knows enough to facilitate what is going to happen. But I don't think she's ever going to graduate up to like even Dylan's standard, because Dylan is working on this whole project as well. And definitely side character and all that, but I liked the acting in it. I liked the guest characters.
Absolutely.
And when you were talking about whether this is Cold Harbor or not, this town, Salt's Neck, and I keep thinking it's Salt lick in my head.
Yeah, there we
Oh,
go.
But,
that's interesting.
it's just one of those meme things.
Jesse.
One of the things that I had seen this week and I meant to bring up is Ben Stiller talked about that he emailed an attorney, a connection of a connection to former President Obama. And he sent an email saying, hey, we have a part where someone is going to talk over animation and we would love for you to do it. And they said 2 days later, he got an email back from the former president saying, I love the show. I wish I had time to do it, but I don't. And Ben Stiller made the joke, okay, what could be more important than being the animated building on my TV show? But whatever. So that's funny. And they ended up getting Keanu Reeves.
Talking about.
Yeah, I think this is going to go back old school. I'm watching Battlestar Galactica and I'm really enjoying it.
Which?
The reboot.
Okay.
And some guy who does a podcast says, okay, there was a scene where Adama said, I would never have stopped looking for you when he's talking to his son. But then in the finale, he flies off acting like he's never going to see his son again. How the hell does that make sense? And I go, oh, wait a minute. That's a damn fine point, Brian. You've just ruined this episode for me.
People change.
And so I'm sitting here going, okay, I can buy that Harmony did this, but why would you come up with the overtime contingency?
Right.
Oh, 'cause she
Why,
worked in
when
a
you're
factory.
deciding this, that,
And
well,
why name it that?
why, okay, and hey, while we're talking about this theoretical solution so that young children won't remember their horrible, like they can have an actual childhood, but there might be a time we need to talk to them. So we're going to build this in. And what would we call it? Oh, yeah. No, that's something you would come down later.
Right.
So thank you, Brian, for popping that bubble for me again. That is why
Come on,
I
you're
love
the
you.
hand-
I
in
love you
science
so
fiction.
much. Every time I think about, yeah, what about? I think Brian is right.
You're way less forgiving than me. That's all I can say.
I'm okay with the rules. It's just sometimes the characters, right?
It comes to character for me.
Yeah, I get it. I
So
do get it.
anyway, thank you so much, Brian, for joining us. You've been a really extra treat on this. Yeah, I do agree with you guys that logically, I understand that this was the perfect place to tell this episode because the ending with her in her car and they finally reach her and it's like, tell me, Mark, tell me everything. Okay, so now then I will be a pissed off Jesse if next week we don't go right to that storyline.
I think next week is the Irving Burt episode.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that's logically the
dude,
next thing.
Why do you expect anything from this show?
Fair point.
Time you do, they stab you in the back.
Yeah. So that's my only thoughts. And I was happy that I got to see this a second time and curious to see where they're going to go for the next two episodes. Yeah.
And it's hard to believe that there's only 2 episodes left because I feel like we've made a load of progress. I still think there's a lot of road ahead of us too. All right, so that wraps up our discussion, our short discussion in quotes of Sweet Vitriol, the shortest episode of the season. Our discussion's still clocked in at almost 2 hours.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Yeah.
We lost our hour last night.
We
So
did.
for next week's episode, here we go. The one-line summary. Mark and Devon team with an ally. Helly investigates further.
Okay.
There we go.
And next week I have to lead the discussion, so that'll be interesting.
Oh, it's my. Oh no, it's your turn next week.
Karen, you lucky dog, you get the last episode of the season.
Cold
Cold Heart.
it all together.
No.
Oh,
So,
okay.
anyhow, Brian, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they look for you on the interwebs?
Find me on, let's see, I say this every week, but on YouTube, if you go to Geek Quorum, we have a few videos there. Our website, geekquorum.com, is currently, it was hacked way back when, and I've never fully restored it. But you can email me at gquorum@gmail.com. That's GQUORUM @gmail.com.
Jesse, where can people view? And what are
I
you up
am,
to?
I am at Jesse Jackson DFW on Twitter, aka X, Jesse Jackson on Facebook. I continue to talk John Hyatt, which is a singer-songwriter, and we're going through Perfectly Good podcast, every John Hyatt song in alphabetical order. Always continue to talk music on Set Listing Bruce. And Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, we are coming up starting on April. We have new Who for every week for 8 weeks. And so we'll be covering all the newest Who episodes.
Very good. Karen.
You can reach us at jklmediareviews@gmail.com. So feel free to email us with your theories, comments, etc.
Excellent. And you can find this podcast on YouTube at JKL Media Reviews. Jesse distributes a audio version of it on the various podcast aggregators, so you can look for it on whatever podcatcher you're using. I have my alternate YouTube channel, which is Lou's Reviews, where I review Stephen King. You'll find all the episodes up there. For all our other JKL Media Reviews, you'll find them on this YouTube channel, and we've done a variety of things such as Dev's Western Horror Stars with Bruce Springsteen, The Tragically Hip, 12 Monkeys, and that was a 4-season biggie. We've done a couple of Mike Flanagan series, and we will be doing the Haunting of Hill House next once Severance is done. And on Twitter, you can find me at Lou W. Sitzma, and the same as for handle as for Blue Sky. So check us out all there. Lots of content, and hopefully you'll find something that you like. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And see.
The proceeding has been a JKL Media production.